I was thinking that if we had a seminar and we called it "How to Live Your Best Life Now," I bet you we could have some people show up if we gave it that name. Don't you think? How to live your best life now, how to have your best life, even if you wanted to you bring God into it, because if you bring God into it, it's going to keep a lot of people away. But if you want to bring God into it, you say, how to have your best life with God or whatever. I bet you we would have some maybe people from outside show up if we promised that we were going to have something like that. But when they got here, when they got here, we said to them, okay, we're going to go over the 10 Commandments. They would feel like they got ripped off, don't you think? They would feel like they got kind of gypped. But isn't that what the 10 Commandments is? All right, 2 people believe that. That's good. Maybe before we're finished, the rest will... we're on the 7th commandment. There we go. I don't want to get ahead of myself. So we're talking about the 7th commandment of adultery. But anyway, back to my story, because the story is more important than this. But isn't that what the 10 Commandment is? 10 Commandments are. Isn't that what God's trying to tell you? He's trying to tell you, and I hate to use this phrase, how to live your best life now. All right? Don't commit adultery, and you'll have a better relationship with your spouse. Duh. And relationship with other people, right? Don't steal, and you'll stay out of jail, and you'll have a better relationship with other people, right? So God's telling us how to live our best lives through the 10 Commandments. They're not just, as some people that are non-Christians would think of the 10 Commandments, are like, oh, you can't do this, and you can't do that, and who's God to tell me, and all that sort of stuff. But with those of us who are saved, we know that these 10 Commandments are for us to help us to live our best lives now as Christians, if you want to put it like that. I hate to put it like that, but then I don't want, just because Joel Osteen says it, doesn't mean that we let him rob us of that phrase, right? I mean, I don't know. Anyway, let's go on to, so we did pretty much most of it. We did what the 7th Commandment directly forbids and what I think it indirectly forbids, right? The sexual morality. And then we looked at the lessons from King David. Let's see, we're on the very end of this now. We looked at the 7th commandment and Christ, but really that should be the 7th commandment and the Trinity. How the 7th commandment relates to the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost. I want to get now to the application, get to the end of this 7th commandment. So, first, some thoughts by way of application, all right? First thought I have right there, faithfulness in our sexuality is foundational for our calling as Christians. For us to be faithful in our sexuality is foundational for us as our calling as Christians. Despite the fact that our society wallows in sexual impurity, they reject God's standards in sexual behavior, they reject God's guidelines. They even reject gender now as a part of identity, right? That you can choose your own gender, right? How far will mankind go in their rebellion against God? And the answer to that question is, as far as they can. There is no limits. There is no limits other than what God gives to the ends that mankind will do in their rebellion against God, even to reject their biology, right? It's like, seems pretty clear, right? You look at your private parts and you know if you're a girl or you're a boy. It seems pretty easy, right? But no, that's what God did. They don't want anything having to do with anything that God has done, anything that any kind of authority God puts over them, even the authority of their gender and how they were made. So that's what our society is all about today, right? We should stand apart from our culture. We should stand for the 7th commandment and everything that it says and everything that it implies, right, which has to do with sex and sexuality in our culture. I got a quote by Joel Beek. He says this. I think he said this. We must have zero tolerance for lustful talk, lustful looks, lustful reading, lustful dress, and lustful touch. For lust is not love. Rather, it defiles desire. It contradicts our holy calling. It corrupts our conversations, and it damns sinners to hell. I've got another quote by an old-timey dude named Samuel Willard who said this. Where are you at? I know he's old, but he's still somewhere. I think he was 1700s. Samuel Willard said this: we must resist and suppress lascivious thought. We ought to withstand them at their first starting and cast them out as soon as we discover them to have gotten into our minds. Think that if we are consecrated temples to the Spirit of God, we ought to keep our house clean. And I like the way he put that last part. We ought to keep our... In this media-driven age, that's number 2 there. In this media-driven age, Christians have to purposely avoid sexuality. Anywhere. You see, well, can I just watch TV? No. Can I listen to the radio? No. Can I scroll through Facebook or the other platforms? No, you can't. We have to purposefully, I can't say that word this morning, avoid sexuality in all forms of media. It reminds us that in order to fully obey the 7th commandment, we need to put a watch over our eyes. We need to put a watch over our ears, all of our senses, right? Pornography, for example, has become a massive problem in our society, and that's because now, it used to be with pornography and dirty pictures and movies, you had to go somewhere, like usually it was the seedy side of town and everything was dark. Now, in the privacy of your own home, it's right there on your phone, right? It's become a massive problem in our society because of even public libraries. Did y'all know some public libraries allow kids to access pornography on the computers? No one goes to the public library for books anymore. Didn't y'all know that? Y'all didn't know that? No one goes to the public library to check out books. That's old-fashioned. Kids go to the public library because that's free internet access. Of course, now that was 20 years ago. Now they all have it on their phones, so never mind. Forget that. All right. David said in Psalm 101, he said, I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside. It shall not cleave unto me. So any media that promotes sin or tempts us to think sinful thoughts should be avoided, even if it's not pornographic. Look at number 3. Whenever there's a guy, Thomas Chalmers, back in the 1600s, had a great sermon called, I can't remember the full name of it, The Expulsive Power of a New Affection. I know that sounds all fancy-dancy. He was in the 1600s. That's how they talked. The expulsive power of... And what Thomas Chalmers is trying to say, I'll summarize it for you in modern language. He's trying to say, look, you want to stop looking at bad pictures or movies or whatever. You want to stop, let's take another commandment, lying. That's fine. You want to put off all those things? That's fine. That's not going to get the job done. If you've got an affection in your heart, it's one thing to put off that negative or bad affection, but you have to replace it with something else. If you don't replace it with something else godly, then something else ungodly will take its place. You can't just say, well, I'm going to stop smoking and drinking or whatever. But whatever you found in your smoking and drinking that made you want to keep doing it, you need to replace that with something else positive. And so I guess that's what I'm trying to say here. As we put off sexuality, sexual lust, immorality, and impurity, we must put on something. We must have something to take its place, right? We must put on self-denying love. Loving the Lord means denying all of our sinful desires. That's part of loving God, whether sexual desires or otherwise. Just like loving your spouse means putting off all sinful desires to want to talk or flirt with someone else of the opposite sex, right? We are God's image bearers. We're not just animals, as the evolutionists would tell us. We're just, the evolutionists say we're animals driven by our lusts. Y'all remember the dude who claimed to be president named Bill Clinton? Y'all remember him? You remember that guy? Okay. Do you remember when the Monica Lewinsky stuff came out? He committed adultery, right? But I remember also some of his defenders. And some of his defenders, especially those ones who are atheistic scientists like Christopher Hitchens and others, they use the defense, oh, well, man's not meant to just have one. Look at the animal kingdom, right? Man's not meant just to have one spouse or sexual partner. It's just part of our animal nature. And so they excuse Bill Clinton's affair by saying, well, powerful men especially, right? But what are they doing? They're comparing us to animals, what they're doing, right? Bill Clinton's just not the top dog. He's not the bull who's stronger than all the other bulls, and he gets to have, no, it's not. We're not animals. Now, if you think we're animals, fine, then I guess you can go down that road and say, well, we shouldn't be monogamous. But we're not animals. We're people made in the image of God. We're God's image bearers. We're not just animals driven by our lusts or driven by our desires, right? But our society has reduced sexuality solely to physical pleasure. They've divorced it from relationships, marriage relationship mainly, and they've made sexuality an idol to be worshiped. Because if you don't worship God, you're gonna worship something. We are created to worship. We are created to worship God, but man has chosen to disregard God. Man has chosen to reject God. Man has chosen to deny God. But that doesn't mean you can change your nature just because you want to ditch God. You're still created to worship. You're going to worship something, right? I've told you this quote before. John Calvin said, "Our hearts are like idol factories." Now, what did he mean by idol factories? Your heart's creating idols every minute you're awake. I mean, you're constantly creating new idols for yourself. It's either going to be God on the throne of your heart that you idolize, or it will be something of your own creation. Usually it'll be self, right? But anyway, so mortifications is the biblical and theological word for it. It's denying of yourself for the glory of God. It's denying your sinful desires, your sinful urges for God's glory so that we can serve Him and we can keep from sinning. And the seventh commandment calls us to do this. Let me conclude this on a couple of quotes. Alistair Begg said this: "Turn away from everything you know to be wrong in word, thought, and action. Be intensely practical and realistic. Lose the phone number. Ditch your computer." Who's going to do that? "Cancel your magazine subscriptions." Boy, this must be an old quote. No one reads magazines anymore. "Change your job. Alter your daily routine. In short, do whatever it takes to separate yourself from the occasion of sin. Do not look for ways to excuse or justify your conduct. Come to God like the wayward son to his father. Make his words your own. I've sinned against heaven and against thee. The promise of the Bible is that God is faithful and just and will forgive our sins and cleanse our consciences, from acts that lead to death so that we might live to serve him." Do you see how the law also serves as a pedagogue leading us to Christ? It's only at the cross we see sin punished and mercy made freely available. And one last quote by J.V. Fesco said this: "Seventh commandment convicts us that we are guilty of idolatry and abandoning Christ, our faithful husband. It tells us we are guilty of adulterous thoughts, sexual misconduct, unbiblical divorce. It tells us we fail to love Christ and our spouses as we should. Beloved, when we sense the law," by the way, if you think you love your spouse as you should, I would say, sure you do. And next you'll tell me you love God as much as you should. I'm not going to believe either one. I'm just not. I'm sorry. If you love your spouse as much as you can and you should, that's fine. Don't expect me to believe it, because I just don't. I don't believe you do. I don't believe I do. I don't believe any of us do as much as we love God as however much we should, right? There's always room for improvement. And that's a good thing about a new year. I don't know who said this, and I quoted it already last week, but I heard somebody say once, the Christian life is a series of new beginnings, right? It's a series of new beginnings. I don't know about you, but I'm not always up here, right? And praise the Lord, I don't know about you, but I'm not always down here either, right? The Christian life is a series of new beginnings. I'm always trying to get further up here, right? And my sin's trying to drag me down further down there, right, in the valley, not on the mountaintop. But the Christian life is a series of new beginnings. Who says that you can't use the new year to make a new start in your daily devotions or whatever you want to make a new start with, or whatever? It's a good time. So anyway, let me finish J.V. Fesco. He says, "Beloved, when we sense the law's condemnation, let us flee to Christ, the faithful one who never looked at a woman with lust, no matter what the stupid movie who came out." Remember in the 80s, the Last Temptation of Christ, that horrific, I don't know what kind of bad words do you want me to use, guys? Where that they said that Christ was guilty of temptation and I guess he looked on Martha maybe to lust or something stupid like that. But anyway, J.V. Fesco says, we should flee to Christ, the faithful one who never looked at a woman with lust, who is never guilty of sexual misconduct, and who has always been faithful to his bride, the church, loving her and laying down his life for her. Why is adultery forbidden? Because God is not a cheater and God is not an adulterer. That's why adultery is forbidden. Why is lying forbidden? Because God's not a liar. All these commandments have to do with the essence, the attributes, and the characteristics of Almighty God. And it's that simple. So I like what he says here. One last thing. He says, let us therefore strive to shine forth the image of Christ, which renews us day by day in our marriage to Christ, our marriage to our spouses, and in our sexual conduct. All right, that's the seventh commandment. Let's go to the eighth commandment. Anybody want to tell me what the eighth commandment is? Turn to Exodus 20, Exodus chapter 20. Do you have your handy-dandy commandment card, anybody? You do? Sister, tell me what the eighth commandment says on your handy-dandy commandment card. Thou shalt not steal. Thank you. And you did pay me for that card, correct? Okay, good, because you just said thou shalt not steal, so I'm just making sure. I'm kidding. I gave them away for free. Anyway. So let's look at Exodus 20:15. It's very simple. It's 4 words. Thou shalt not steal. Now, I went back and looked at the original Hebrew, and it means you shouldn't steal. So there we go. All right, anyway, we all realize this commandment refers to taking something that's not yours, right? Without the owner's knowledge or the owner's permission, taking something that's not yours. Now, unfortunately, stealing is pretty routine in our society. It seems like it's becoming more and more routine in our society, right? You ever seen those smash and grabs that are happening in the big cities, right? Big cities are places to live, y'all. We should all move. You ready? I don't mind people from the big city. Jared's heard this before. I don't mind people in the big city moving out to where we live in the country. My nearest neighbor is a half a mile walk through the woods. My other nearest neighbor is probably, what would you say, about a mile that way to, what's his name's house? Yeah. So, but all these city folks from Houston are moving out, buying land, and they're putting in their lights. So used to be able to see the stars at night. Now we got all kind of light pollution. Noise pollution, and then other things like they're trying to constantly invite you to barbecues and stuff. But anyway, I think that the people moving down from Houston, they want to live in the same suburb that they moved away from. They want to make it just like the place. I'm like, no, this is don't make it just like the place that you left. We like it out here. We like it quiet. We like to see the stars at night. We don't like a lot of loud noise and stuff, unless it's Jared firing off his AR or me firing off my new shotgun, my new old shotgun, or whatever. Anyway, that's okay. Other than that, we don't like a lot of. But anyway, all these Houstonians are moving up there, and it's just there goes the neighborhood. Anyway. I'm not trying to say that just because Jared and his wife moved from Houston to where we live. But anyway, stealing, it seems like, is routine in our society. I don't know how I got off onto that other stuff. Larceny and theft make up approximately 56% of all crime in the United States. The largest source of property crime in the U.S. is theft, and now coming up second and coming up close behind is shoplifting, right? It's just economic, what do they call shoplifting now? Economic equity or something like that. These are poor people that don't have enough, and they don't have as much as you do, and they're trying to achieve economic equality, and shoplifting is one of the ways they do that, right? So it's called the Robin Hood defense. Y'all know the Robin Hood defense, right? All right. The Robin Hood defense underlies one of the bedrock tenets of socialism, right, is the Robin Hood defense. What's the Robin Hood defense? You all know the story of Robin Hood, right? Steal from the rich and give to who? The poor. And we all thought Robin Hood was a hero, right? Because he stole from the rich and he gave to the poor, whatever. And we still have that Robin Hood mindset today, right? Oh, it's just a rich person. We can take whatever they have. We can jack up their taxes to 60, 70%. That's not a problem. It's the rich. Who cares? Unless I become rich, then all of a sudden I care. But anyway, until then. It's a big company. Oh, it's the big companies, and who cares about that? Oh, it's the big, what's popular now? It's the big drug companies. The drug companies are making all this money selling us drugs. Yeah, I hate that too, man. I hate living to 95 and 100. That stinks, that really stupid drug companies. But it's the drug companies. Who cares if we rip them off? It's just the big, giant Walmart. Who cares if we steal some from Walmart? The big, giant corporations. Who cares about that? Place of businesses. Stealing from these people and entities is justified. Why? Because they have more than we do. You ever heard this? Well, they have so much they'll never miss it, right? They have so much they'll never miss it, right? I used to think that about my parents. I used to go in my mom's purse when I was a little kid. Don't tell her, because there's still some things I have not told my parents, right? I did tell my stepdad, either the last time we were there, Jared was there, and maybe it was before then. I did tell him, look, just to let you know, when I was in junior high, I snatched your keys and I took the car out for a little joyride. When I was in junior high, I could barely see over. I didn't take it out on the road. We lived in a big apartment complex, and I took it riding around the apartments, and all my buddies thought I was, man, he's riding around it. What? And they all ran alongside the car. I thought I was cool. I was cool, man. But anyway, but you don't need to tell them about the other thing. But anyway, they have so much. I thought, well, my mom will never miss a dollar here or a dollar there or whatever. Or you ever heard this excuse? They can afford it, right? Or I'm not hurting anyone. You ever heard that? So we have all kind of excuses today. I'm going to read you something from, I think it's John MacArthur said this. Stealing is a sin just as murder and adultery are sins. Stealing to satisfy one's basic needs, such as food, should evoke sympathy, but it's still a sin worthy of punishment. When the poor steal, they dishonor the name of their God. God's curse shall fall on the unrepentant thief. Paul includes thieves among those who will not inherit the kingdom of God in 1 Corinthians, right? So I like what he says here. When someone steals because they're hungry and need food, that should evoke our sympathy, but it's still a sin. Whether you like it or not, whether we like it or not, it's still a sin. So in other words, God accepts no excuses for violating the 8th commandment. I don't know of any other commandment that God accepts excuses for. But there's a lot of excuses made for this commandment, and I'm saying that God accepts no excuses for violating the 8th commandment. Every excuse has at its foundation the idea that we can ignore God's law simply because we need something or we want something. If we need it or want it bad enough, then we can ignore God's law. That underlies all of these excuses, right? People instinctively know that stealing is wrong. That's why they hide the stuff that they steal. And that's why you can say, well, they hide it just because they don't want to get caught. Yes. But also, people know that stealing is wrong. Well, we know that from the book of Romans. It said the law of God is written on their hearts. But we also know that they know stealing is wrong because of all the excuses they make for it. If you thought something wasn't wrong, you wouldn't make excuses for it, would you? No, you wouldn't. So anyway, Romans 2:15 says that, I just said that in my brain, and here I have it written down. I'll tell you what, whoever is pretty smart. No, I'm kidding. Romans 2:15 I've got written here says that all people, quote, show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness. No one can stand and claim ignorance of the law. When they get up before the Lord on Judgment Day, Lord, I didn't know your law. I was born in a tribe in the middle of Africa. I never saw a Bible. No one ever preached Jesus to me. I didn't know stealing was wrong. That's a lie. They broke that commandment. But no, the law of God is written on their hearts and in their conscience, right? So everyone knows what's right and what's wrong. Well, most everyone believes that theft is wrong. Most everyone will say, well, theft is wrong. And then now today will accept, and then they'll have an exception for it. This commandment, like all the commandments we've seen, goes beyond the physical act of stealing, all right? The 8th commandment goes beyond the physical act of stealing. The 8th commandment not only speaks to our duty, it speaks to our duty to our neighbor. We shouldn't steal from our neighbor. But guess what? The 8th commandment is not just horizontal, it's also what? What's the opposite of horizontal? Vertical. It's vertical, right? And in other words, the 8th commandment has to do with our relationship to God. Not just that we don't steal from our neighbor, but our relationship with God as well, or our duty, I should say that, our duty to God. The 8th commandment says a lot about how much we trust God for his provisions. How much do we trust God for his care over us? It also leads us to Christ. Let's go to, let's define the 8th commandment real quick. This won't take long. I think it's pretty simple, right? 4 words, thou shalt not steal. The Heidelberg Catechism says the 8th commandment forbids, and I quote, outright theft and robbery, also cheating and swindling our neighbor by using fraudulent merchandising, counterfeit money, this is old, excessive interest, and all greed and pointless squandering of his gifts. What are they saying here? They're saying if God has given you something and you just waste it, you violated the 8th commandment. You violated it, right? Now, I don't know if I have it here, but I maybe have it somewhere else. I thought, well, how can we bring this to modern day? I thought of Facebook Marketplace. I love going on to Facebook Marketplace because I'm a member of these groups, Bible groups, buy, sell, trade Bibles. And I love going on there and see who's got something for sale that I might be interested in. And so I need to not because I don't have the money. But anyway, I thought of that. Misrepresenting something you're trying to sell on Facebook Marketplace, misrepresenting it, right? Or a car that you say works, the car runs great. What you're not saying is that you just spent $300 having something fixed and now it runs great, but it's getting old and breaking down. Stealing can be done in various ways. So I just thought on top of my head, here's what I came up with. Fraud. Actually, I just got that from the Heidelberg. Deceit, embezzlement, not returning borrowed property. I had an instance of my potential breaking of the 8th commandment about a month ago when we were helping Jared, I say we, Jared and I and Jaden were helping my parents move because you remember my mom had a stroke and had COVID and all that bad stuff go on, so they had to leave their house. It's way too big for them anyway. And Jared and I had the job of helping them move everything out of their house they've been in for 30 years. And my mom had a toaster sitting out in the garage in a bag next to some other stuff that we were just we're supposed to throw away, right? And it's not like we live in the country. Jared and I live in the country. We burn a lot of our stuff. No, you have to actually go dump it somewhere legal in the city. And it's all a hassle and stuff. So anyway, I saw this toaster sitting in the bag. I'm like, this looks like a good toaster. I eat toast a lot. I'm going to take this toaster home instead of get thrown away. Why get thrown? And anyway, so I take the toaster home. Pretty good toaster. And I like it. And then Jared texts me or something. He's like, hey, you know where that toaster went that was in the garage? I'm like, yeah, I got it at the house. Why? He's like, Shirley, that's my mom. Shirley's asking about it. I'm like, what do you mean asking about it? She's sitting in the garage next to the stuff to be thrown away. You mean she wants that toaster? He's like, yeah. I'm like, I text him like, well, I ain't giving it back. I said, I'm not giving the toaster back. I mean, look, and I started to justify it. Look, we're spending hours and hours and hours of our time helping them move and all the labor, and my back's bad already and all of this. And if she needs to do without one stupid toaster, which she probably will hardly ever use, you can tell her if you want. I don't care. I'll tell her I'm keeping your toaster. And I may have even told her that. I don't know. But I got under conviction. I got under conviction about it because it's my parents. I just broke 2 commandments. Honor your parent and don't steal. So last time we were there, maybe a time before we were there, it all runs together. I told her I got a gift for her, and I had it in a box or a bag, and I took it out. And here, I got you a toaster. And so it was good for a laugh and whatever. So I gave her a toaster back. So anyway. But at its root, stealing is motivated by greed. I wanted that toaster, no doubt. Selfishness. I wanted good toast, no doubt. This is a fancy toaster too, man. Fancy. You just push the button and it pops up. You don't got to wait till the cycle's complete even, or push the thing back up to make it. I had this one toaster, it was so awful, you had to unplug it before the stuff would pop up. Oh no, that's the one in the mission house. That toaster's in the mission house now. So if you make any toast in the mission house, you got to unplug it for the toast to pop up. Otherwise, it's going to stay there till, I don't know how long, till it starts a fire, I guess. Anyway, can you turn to Amos? I'm sorry, I feel like I'm aimlessly talking. Get it? Aimless? No, that didn't. Okay. All right, anyway. All right. Amos. Let's see. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, and Joel and Amos. All right, Amos 8. I'm sorry, I didn't say the chapter. Amos 8. Amos chapter 8. My mom has the toaster now. I hope she likes it a lot. I got a better toaster now, so I don't care about it. I didn't need her toaster anyway. I didn't need her toaster. Amos 8, 4 through 7. Hear this, O ye that swallow up the needy, even to make the poor of the land to fail, saying, when will the new moon be gone, that we may sell corn, and the Sabbath that we may set forth wheat, making the ephah small and the shekel great, and falsifying the balances by deceit. A whole bunch of sins here. Well, a couple more verses. That we may buy the poor for silver and the needy for a pair of shoes, yea, and sell the refuse of the wheat. The Lord hath sworn by the excellence of Jacob, surely I will never forget. He didn't mean this in a good way. I will never forget any of their works. That's not in a good way, like, oh, I'm never going to forget you, honey. I'm going to go off for a month, but I'm never going to forget you, and I'll be back on this journey or whatever. No, he's never going to forget any of their works when it comes to judgment, right? These are not good things, right? There's deceit that's going on, right? They're stealing what's supposed to be left to the poor. Remember Ruth and the grains that she was able to glean that was supposed to be there for the poor to be able to gather? These people are not letting the poor do it. They're messing with their balances. Right? I'm not old enough to, but some of y'all may be old enough to remember where you went to a butcher shop to get meat and you had to wonder whether they were going to put their finger on the scale, right? Or whatever, right? Anyway, but all of this is an example of the theft that God hates. I've got some other Old Testament examples that I'll just give you that we won't turn to all the references. In the Old Testament, the Eighth Commandment was specifically applied to a bunch of issues. Here's some of them. Number one, kidnapping. Obviously, that's stealing. Joseph's brothers committed sin, right? Land, number two. Taking land that didn't belong to you is in the Old Testament considered a violation of the Eighth Commandment. Animals, stealing livestock is considered a violation of the Eighth Commandment, right? Wages. By the way, if anybody wants to steal any of our rabbits, I won't say nothing. Come on in. I'll pretend like I didn't see nothing. Anyway, that's a joke because my wife raises rabbits and you know who ends up taking care of them most of the time. All right. Wages, not giving your employees a fair wage or cheating your employees, right? Cheating laborers. Merchants, being dishonest with their weights and measurements, right? Or dishonest with their pricing. So those are some of the things that are in the Old Testament, right? So let's finish off. We got to stop now. And let's finish off what the Eighth Commandment forbids. And I won't go over. No, we just need to stop because I do want to go over some of these, right? But we're going to go over these next time a little bit. Here's what the Eighth Commandment forbids, according to me, right? And I have Bible, I think, to support all this. Eighth Commandment forbids theft and robbery. It forbids kidnapping, inaccurate measurements, cheating the government. Look, work. So, look, I'm not going to get into this discussion with anybody. I'm just not. And you're not going to get this discussion with me, not during Sunday school. But I don't think you should cheat on your taxes. I don't care what excuse you want to make for the government. I don't care how unjust the government is. That's just my personal opinion. I think that's stealing. I may not like what the government uses my taxes for, right? And if that's your thing, it's like, well, I don't want the government to use my taxes to support abortion. I get that. I'm not gonna rile you up, and I'm not going to be against you. I'm just saying it's my personal conviction that I shouldn't cheat on my taxes because that is theft. I'm stealing from the government, right? So I would never do that, right? You want to have an excuse for why you do that, that's between you and God, and I'm not going to be your judge. But that's why I put that up there for number 4. I don't know how else we cheat the government unless you work for the government and then you cheat the government of time or whatever. I'm sure there's other ways of cheating the local government and the state government and the national government, not just through the IRS and your taxes. If there's anyone that deserves to be cheated on, it's the IRS. But I don't think that we get a pass for the Eighth Commandment. I don't think we get a pass by that. I just don't. Anyway, we'll look into that in a little bit more detail next time. Let's stand and be dismissed. A word of prayer.